Welcome to this very special, very exciting RTS event, Why We Love TV Quiz Shows. My name is Boyd Hilton. I'm the entertainment director of Heat magazine and the deputy editor of Pilot TV magazine, free quarterly with Empire, out now in all good newsagents. And I am genuinely a huge fan of TV quiz shows. I'm happy to while away hours, perhaps days on end, watching endless repeats on Challenge. And we've got a fantastic panel today to celebrate the genre of quiz shows, to look at why they're so exciting and interesting and phenomenal, what makes a successful one, how they've evolved over the years, and to get some great stories about working on quiz shows from these legends that we have with us today, starting with a legend among legends, Anne Robinson, who helped turn the weakest link into a phenomenon. James Fox is managing director of Remarkable. They make a vast array of quiz shows: Pointless, £1 Million Drop, The Big Spell, Ejector Seat, House of Games with Richard Osman, and The Wall with Danny Dyer.
Round of applause.
Jo Street is the head of daytime commissioning at Channel 4 and has overseen a huge array of quiz shows herself, including Eggheads and Impossible, and has worked with Anne. Welcome. And the great Judith Keppel, the first UK winner of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And the star of Eggheads, of course. So we'll cover both of those. Let's start with the general obvious question of why do TV quiz shows have such an enduring legacy? And what is it so special about the genre itself, do you think?
Do you have to use genre?
Sorry, what's wrong with genre?
Well, it's only television people who talk about genre.
Everyone does now.
Do they?
Yeah.
Well, I'm very old. I don't really know, but I'll try. I think it's because a whole family can join in. I think it's because you can sit at home and be clever. And if you've got a good quiz show, once you start watching, it's very difficult not to watch to the end. And people get, I think particularly, I've always thought that people who work at home, waiters in restaurants, and people who are there at 5:30, it becomes a really important, it's rather like, you know, watching a soap, you absolutely, and it helps enormously, I think, if it's something that's on all year round. So you're devastated during Wimbledon, you know.
Yes, people do get really annoyed when their favourite quiz show is postponed or is not on when something happens.
But the idea that all of you can sit at home and one of you will get there's a huge satisfaction of being able to answer, particularly at University Challenge or something.
James, is that the key, that, you know, we're all joining in, we can join in a kind of almost virtual way and not trying to answer the questions and trying to see how far we'd get if we were taking part?
I think so. I think particularly nowadays where we might not be watching TV together as much as we used to, that actually a lot of quizzes, it's the sort of rare genre, if you forgive the term, type of TV that you can sit and watch as a family. And that's what we're certainly finding with some of our shows at the moment, that actually kids and teenagers are watching it with their parents, which is quite a rare thing to do. But I also think it's about the familiarity. You know, when Pointless isn't on at 5:15, there's uproar, and the BBC get more complaints about that than many other things. So it's something that you can come back to day after day. You know the format, you know probably what's going to happen, but it might just change each day, and that's what brings you back.
Jo, you've worked on specific quiz shows, and now you're kind of, you know, effectively in charge of commissioning them daytime at Channel 4. So are channels aware of the importance, they must be, of just how important they are and how pissed off people would be if they're not on every week or every day or whatever people are used to?
Well, when I first started commissioning in daytime at the BBC, one of the first shows I had to look after was Eggheads. And it's reliant on quite a lot of repeats, and I hadn't quite got my head around how repeats were working, and we broke the run in the wrong place. And so there was a jackpot building, and literally the complaints log crashed because the resolving episode didn't play out. And you kind of, you sort of disrespect the quiz audience at your peril, I think. I think for schedulers, for controllers and for commissioners, there are a way you can define a channel, you know. You know what a channel is by what quizzes are on it. And I think it's a way of putting people on the telly, which people love to see themselves reflected. And they bring you massive audiences. And so, of course, that's ultimately what we want to do, is drive audiences to our shows.
Judith, were you a fan of this type of show? I'm not going to use the G word.
What, general quizzes in
general? Of
general?
general quizzes before you applied to go on Millionaire. Was it something you enjoyed watching anyway?
Well, sometimes, I mean, not particularly, I have to say. But, I mean, they're so varied, aren't they? They're the highbrow ones. And I think people watch the highbrow ones, University Challenge, Mastermind, things like that, because it's rather like watch the same reasons as people watch sport. I mean, there are people being really brilliant. And, I mean, perhaps you can be brilliant too. I mean, it's rather like when people watch Wimbledon, they then go and start playing tennis, thinking it all looks so easy on Wimbledon. And then you go back on the tennis court, and of course you can't do it at all. I think there's a sort of similarity between the kind of highbrow University Challenge type ones and watching sport. It's the same sort of mental mindset.
Middlebrow or low? Where would you place Millionaire in the brow?
Well, Millionaire, the reason I went on Millionaire was because it was huge sums of money and quite easy questions. So that's not a highbrow one, I don't think.
Well, interesting you should say that. Well, to remind ourselves of this glorious historic moment, we've got a clip of Millionaire, View on Millionaire. Let's have a look.
Have a look at question number 15 of 15. Which king was married to Eleanor of Aquitaine? Henry I, Henry II, Richard I, Henry V.
I think it's Henry II. I saw her tomb, fun enough, in France this summer.
What did it say on it?
Well,
That's quite
I hope
important.
it said that she was married to Henry II. I said I wasn't going to gamble when I came back, and I sort of can't resist it.
You've got £32,000 at the moment, you've got £500,000.
I did it at school for A-levels, and I'm I'm trying to remember.
Take your
rather
time, take as long as you need.
I do think it's Henry II. I think it's Henry II.
It's up to you.
I'm going to say Henry II.
Final answer.
Yeah, final answer.
You've just won £1 million! You are amazing! £1 million!
I mean, that was quite a highbrow question.
Well, an amazing number of people say, oh, I knew the answer to that question.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It was incredibly tense just watching that back, but you seemed completely calm, at ease. Is that a technique you had to learn, or is that just your natural, you weren't affected by the lights and the pressure?
I mean, I'm like a duck. I was paddling madly underneath. I mean, no, I wasn't calm at all. I thought my heartbeat was beating so loud, I thought the mics would pick it up. No, I didn't feel calm at all.
And that format, as soon as it arrived, it felt to me as a viewer and as a TV critic like an instantly fantastic, incredibly compelling format. Did it feel that way to you, taking part in it and going on that?
Yes, I mean, I took part in it because it was an incredibly good and exciting programme. I mean, it really was thrilling. But, I mean, partly because £1 million is a huge amount of money, but also you had your sort of plateaus on the way up. You weren't going to go crashing down to naught. But also the sort of psychology of it. I mean, when you watch various different contestants, it's all very close up and you can see what they're thinking. And it's a sort of, the format allows you to take risks because you're saved by the 32,000 stop. You know, you're not going to lose absolutely everything. So you can take little risks here and there. And so people sit there and they're wondering whether to take the risk or not. So, I mean, for the viewer, I think it's quite interesting because you can see it in their faces. Whether they're going to take a risk or whether they're going to chicken out or whether they're thinking of the mortgage and going to take the money, you know, that sort of thing.
There was a thrill around that as well, about trying to get onto the show. I spent hours of my life ringing from a landline, as soon as I get home from work, trying to get through to get onto that fastest finger first thing. It just became this world that you wanted, and it did feel really tangible when it landed.
Did you practice
No, I didn't.
You didn't do this?
I couldn't think of how to do it, so I didn't. But I mean, I got on.
They do now, don't they? Famous, I think they're...
People do. They invent little sort of gadgets and they practice on them.
Yeah.
But and most people, nowadays, it's 2-point-something seconds to get on. Well, I got on in 8 seconds.
Wow.
Because no one else knew the answer.
That is true.
I mean, there's so much luck involved in quizzes, that's the thing. I mean, that was one huge piece of luck.
Sure.
That nobody else knew the answer.
And when you first saw that show, did you think, oh, that is an incredible, great format? Yeah.
I think one of the things is that the money's going up and the questions are getting more difficult. And that's not the case with most. I mean, if I could have £10 for every time the answer was Jason and the Argonauts, you know, there's a difficulty if you're staying at that level to try and think of original questions. And also, quizzes tend to know, they can say Tolstoy or Kingsley Amis without ever having read a book.
Yes.
You know, quizzes get used to questions. And that's the great thing about Millionaire, is they're really difficult once you get on.
Does it make much difference, the genre, I'm using that word again, the type of question? So, you know, Millionaire, all the shows we're talking about really have to have across varied different types of questions: sport, entertainment, literature, history. Having taken part in them so much, do you get annoyed if it doesn't seem a fair spread of types of question?
Well, I always think there's far too much pop music and sport. And in point of fact, Eggheads was designed so that in every single game, 2 of the rounds were either pop music, sport, or what's the other thing? Oh, film and television. I mean, there were 3 populist subjects, and 2 of them were always in each game. And I used to think that was a bit unfair, because they're not my subjects. But that's just personal.
Did you learn from when that format arrives and becomes pretty much an instant hit? Is that the kind of thing that when you're creating your own shows, do you look at that and you think there are lessons to be learned from this format, the way it works, the build, the different levels, the different stages of it?
Well, I worked on that first series, actually. Oh, wow. And it was, you know, I was sort of researcher looking after contestants, and no one knew it was going to be that big, but it was instantly huge, and the ratings were 17, 18 million overnight. That everyone sort of forgets that, and it also played as a strip across 10 nights, I think. So it just got this unbelievable momentum that built and built and built, and the Sun were backing it, and Chris was on the radio, and it had a whole thing that went around it. So it was an incredible bit of marketing as well as the format itself. But the format is genius because, as Judith says, there's enough in there to let people take a risk, take a gamble. We'll show you the next question. We'll show you the answers. The lifelines were the thing that when they were creating the idea, that's what really unlocked it, because people were stopping, but the lifelines got people that bit further. And really, when we're thinking of quizzes now, particularly big money ones, it's all about that game of risk and how far will people go, how far will you push them, and finding people who want to come on the show and give it a go.
Quiz shows evolve, though, don't they? Let's talk about The Weakest Link for a bit. And before we do talk about it in depth, we've got a clip now of the very first episode, I believe. Let's have a look.
Of the 9 people preparing for today's show, only one can win and take home up to £10,000. the other 8 teammates will leave the studio with nothing. Why? Because they'll each be voted the weakest link.
Welcome to The Weakest Link. Any of the 9 people in the studio today could win up to £10,000. They don't know each other, however, if they want the prize money, they'll have to work as a team. But 8 of them will leave with nothing, as round by round we lose the player voted the weakest link.
This feels like an all-time great format. Did it arrive in that form when you first started on it, or did it evolve and did it turn into?
No, I got a letter which said we've created a quiz show which we think is very different. We think Anne will be the best presenter because she'll look as if she knows the answers to the questions, and she'll be able to ease the disappointment of the contestants as they leave the show. And actually, it was for a holiday, and the money went down. There were 12 contestants, and I think Lynn is there, who persuaded me to do it. And it was quite complicated. It was even complicated. We tested it with sort of runners who have all these degrees, and they could hardly answer anything. And also, it was quite difficult at the beginning to move around and get the hang of that. And eventually, we got it down to 9 contestants. The money was going up to 10,000. And right at the last knockings, we got 9 quizzes in who'd done more television than the rest of us. And in an old, dirty rehearsal room, wasn't it, on a television centre. And about the second round, there was a guy with short white blouse. He looked like a customs official, and Jesus sandals. And I said to him, "Why are you voting off Janet?" And he said, "Anyone who doesn't know the name of the Teletubbies shouldn't be here." And I thought, we don't have to be nice. You know, these are incredibly competitive people who want to win. And so I just became me, I think. And then we did a pilot, which you didn't get to the end, and Jane Lush said it was the least promising. And somebody annoyed me in the first round, and instead of just saying, "You are the weakest link," I said, "You are the weakest link. Goodbye." And that's...
And the wink, was the wink there from?
I'd done the wink on Points of View.
Right.
And that's how it came about.
But your persona was so key to the success of that show, wasn't it? So it's almost unthinkable to have anyone else presenting it from the start.
Well, I think if you've worked in a newspaper newsroom, that's how people talk to each other. You know, it's very irreverent, and that's what I was used to. And also, although people said later that was a terrible risk to take to be horrible, I didn't really think of that. I just thought it was a bit more original. It was a great deal funnier, and it wasn't cheesy. I'm just not cheesy.
Was there any kickback from the BBC though? Because I guess a standard rule of TV is people have to be likeable, but this kind of flew in the face of that.
Well, I mean, that is incredibly tame, when you look back. Of course, the log for that. Now, I never quite understand why the BBC, instead of thinking, wow, they think, oh, terrible. But we built, not like Millionaire, but we did build an astonishing audience for August, I think.
Right. Yeah. So it became a ratings hit pretty quickly, did it?
Yeah, very quickly, yeah.
I was on an episode, I think, for kind of showbiz journalists and people like that, and your line for me was that I was way too old to work for Heat magazine. This was 10 years ago. I'm still there. So you were right. And Judith, you were on Weakest Link as well, weren't you?
Yes, I was on the Weakest Link. I thought it was terribly cleverly done, because from the minute you walked into the studio, it was all pitch dark. There was the kind of shaven-headed man hung about cables who kind of shoved you onto your dais, and it was all dark. And then you were already feeling rather nervous, and then eventually Anne would appear, didn't say hello to anybody, just stood there glaring at you, and it started. And so everyone was kind of jittering by that time. You know, the way it was produced created this atmosphere. And then Anne on top of it.
Yeah. What was Anne's attack line for you? Was there a... do you remember?
Yes, I do. I was out quite quickly, and then she started asking me how much I'd given my phone a friend.
Ah.
And she went on and on and on. And eventually, I sort of, like a politician, dodged the question as long as I could. And because I thought there might be tax implications, apart from anything else. And eventually, I just said, I really don't think this is any of your business.
Actually, Judith, I mean, in 11 years of being incredibly rude to thousands of people, for the first time, it was the last week of Weakest Link, and I did go on and on. And in the end, she said what nobody had said. She said, it's none of your business. And also, I thought, you know, normally the host goes in and says hello, hi. And right from the beginning, I knew it was important not to make friends with anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, did you know, because we're talking about greatness of these formats, and this is a great as well, I think, isn't it? Did you know early on that that there was something special about the Weakest Link format with Anne hosting?
Well, at the time when Weakest Link first went on telly, I was a director on Country File and became obsessed by the Weakest Link and I just wanted to work on it. So I came to the show as a fan and, you know, was lucky enough to land a job in the edit and then in the studio. But it's one of those moments when everything comes together. It's a brilliant format, but the format wouldn't be what it was without Annie. And you could get away with so much because of the wink. I mean, you know, when you're replying to letters of complaint about rudeness and hostility and bullying, and you go, you know, it's all an act. Look at the wink at the end. It's, you know, everyone's in on the joke-ish. And, but, you know, that show wouldn't have been that show with a warm, cuddly host that people weren't terrified of.
Absolutely, yeah. Jay, go on.
It became part of the format.
Yeah.
In that you did the show in America, and then when you looked at some of the international hosts who did it, they all either adopted that personality or even started dyeing their hair and looking like you. And
They all had to.
Absolutely playing that role. And there's very few shows, actually, that it's the host then becomes so interwoven in it that then that becomes part of the international rollout of it as well.
All the hosts came to Pinewood for about 2 or 3 days to get the hang of it. And it was good if they were journalists, because you can ask those questions and you can think quickly off the top of your head. Some were actors, actresses, and I never thought that worked. I think it lost some of the flavour. And the ones that stayed the course were a bit more like me. I mean, the one in South Africa, she was really horrible. And that worked.
How important is the host, though? Is the host always absolutely key? I mean, there are some shows that you can imagine different trying out. People have changed it. Shows change hosts, don't they, over time? But for you, when you're thinking of people for your different shows, is that a difficult process to find the right?
Me.
Both of you?
Well, it is. It's a discussion we have lots of who is the right fit. I mean, I think the host is obviously absolutely crucial and could probably take a good show and make it a great show. That will be the thing that will, in the end, make the difference. Equally, I think when you look at how shows do this sort of international journey that they do, it shows that different hosts bring different things and that feel, you know, culturally right for whichever country you're in. So I think in the end, it's sort of building blocks. You've got to have a great format, but the host in the end will be the thing that really makes the show special, or particularly make it cut through with an audience here in the UK.
And hosts can bring an audience as well. So you look at Danny Dyer on the Wall, he's bringing an audience to a show who maybe are not going to watch a quiz on a Saturday night because he lives somewhere else. And, in the same way that Annie did on Weekers, a lot of the Heartland knew her from Point of View or knew from Watchdog. It's quite weird seeing that clip because it's very much styled from Watchdog, that. It's like straight out of one studio and into another, and how that persona changed. And then other shows, you can recast, and the format's robust enough to carry it forward.
When NBC came over quite early, they had an American possibility who'd won the first Survivor, and both of us did a run through and did it, and I was lucky enough to get it.
Yeah, which was extraordinary. That's incredibly unusual, isn't it, that a British host does the American version? Yeah. And what was that like? Was that a very different experience doing that version?
Well, there were 8 contestants. I mean, the Weakest Link, they were very keen to keep the format, but America persuaded the BBC to do 8 contestants. I think it's to do the time and the break. And there was always an audience, and they kept the studio very cold to keep everybody awake, and they paid the audience so they could get the pretty people in the front row. And actually, Americans are natural performers and broadcasters, even if they don't know the answers. So it was great.
But I always think that Americans, certainly in mainstream big primetime TV, probably think you could go too far with your harshness. Did you ever get into trouble about that?
Yeah, I remember the first time a soap star, I said, have you had, how many facelifts have you had? And there was a kind of deep intake of breath, but they kept it in.
And what was it like? A lot of quiz shows hosted, you're doing it day in, day out. Sometimes you're doing more than one a day. Is it kind of, is that difficult to maintain the kind of excitement level, to maintain that peak?
The first series, we were doing 5 a day. Wow. They take 2.5 hours because you're moving the cameras all the time. And I think it was when Ruth Davis, I think, did you nearly break her fingers in the car door? Yeah, I mean, we were exhausted. It was 12 o'clock at night. And then we went down to 3, which is, it's a lot of, standing, and there isn't a script, so you are sort of doing stand-up, but still quite exhausting, actually.
James, do you drive I imagine a lot of your shows are more than one a day.
Yeah, Pointless, our daytime shows on Pointless are 4 a day. Richard Osman's House of Games is 5, so we do a whole week of programmes in a day. So yeah, it's hard work.
There must be a real skill for the presenters to keep fresh, to keep it going at that level.
I had a massage between 1 and 2.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I think Richard just has Nando's. That's what keeps him going.
Richard has Nando's?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard. It's hard work. It's hard work for the team as well when you're resetting and trying to get through everything in a day. But equally, you get into a kind of natural rhythm, and you come to a point where it's like, right, come on, let's do another one.
And Judith, when you're a regular on a show like Eggheads, which is constantly challenging your knowledge of different areas, and you have to maintain that level, you constantly looking at questions, constantly kind of testing your own knowledge to keep on that.
Revising.
Yes.
Well, yes, I used to read the sports pages avidly, and I learned that actually if all you read was the headlines, that would be enough. So it wasn't too bad. And then I used to try and concentrate on television and films and things like that, who won the Oscars and so on. I mean, yes. I mean, Pat Gibson, who was a terrifically good quizzer, he always says he reads the papers cover to cover, and that's how he kind of keeps up with the news. And then I also used to sort of think, I mean, I didn't know the positions in rugby, for example. So I remember I had to learn the positions in rugby because I had no idea. So I used to read the papers and then look things up on Wikipedia quite a lot.
One of the really significant things I think about quizzes is that the older you are, the less chance you've got of winning. I'd called a sort of generic guy Norman, and he would have worked for the Foreign Office and had 2 degrees, and he'd come on, he'd say, "My name is Norman, and I'm 65. And the first thing is, he'd pissed everybody off in the green room. And secondly, he couldn't, whatever his knowledge, he couldn't summon it up quickly enough.
Well, I always think there's a sort of optimum age, and it's probably about 50, which is you're old enough to have learnt an awful lot of facts, and you're still young enough not to start forgetting them. I mean, there's...
Joe mentioned it, but you have got a new hit quiz show, James, which we need to talk about, The Wall.
Yep.
Before we do, I think we've got a clip. Let's have a look. Now, there are many incredible things about The Wall, but one thing that strikes me, first of all, is that it's not only is it a really interesting format, prime-time show, it's Saturday night, BBC One. Yeah. Now, that kind of slot, it doesn't get much more pressure than that, does it really? BBC One constantly needs big hits on a Saturday night. Was this always designed to be in that kind of slot? And how did it get commissioned? How did it end up on the way to becoming this key element of BBC One on Saturday?
So it started in America. It was on NBC and had done a couple of series. And then it started going around the world to, I think it's now in 23, 24 different countries around the world. And it had become something of a hit. On NBC, it had played in the heart prime time. Elsewhere, it had played as a more sort of 7 o'clock as a strip. But it meant there had been hundreds of episodes of the show. So it showed that it could be long running, that you could have lots of different outcomes, that it had something to it. And I think probably it was that in the end that the BBC thought, we've got to give this a go. And just try something a bit different on Saturday nights on BBC One, knowing that if it was going to play in that slot coming off the back of Strictly, as you say, it's a pretty pressurised place to go. But also, you're looking for a show that's got real scale, and that's what that offered. Add to that, Danny, who just gives a completely different flavour from anything else, anything else I've ever seen, really, as a game show host, because he was from such a different world, in the way that Anne was from a very different world, that I think it just gave it a completely different tone and took a game that was, it's sort of so ridiculous, it's so huge, it's great big balls bouncing down a wall, but Danny's character was sort of big enough to own it. And I think in the end, the audience responded to that.
Is that choice of host, is that similar to the previous versions? Do they have, he's such a unique figure, he's an actor first and foremost. Did they have actors hosting it elsewhere, or was this unique to your...
No, we sent a finished version to NBC and to the format creators in the US, and there was just this sort of slight silence of not really knowing what was going on, but also asking for a few translations of some of Danny's... Keiko Bako doesn't really translate so much.
And is this example of a show that was, does word of mouth help? Because I remember watching it first of all and seeing, now of course you face Twitter reaction and that kind of thing.
Which is
and people, brutal, right. And some people being quite brutal, as they are about any new show, really. But then it feels to me the story of The Wall is a bit, people laughing at it a bit to start with and then laughing with it and kind of growing to love it and becoming a big hit. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think people came to it and thought, what is this? But kind of got sucked into it, partly by the game and partly by Danny, and those two things coming together. And I think probably like any quiz, you need to watch it a few times to really understand the rules, and that's actually quite a complex format, even though the thing is simple, the format within it is quite complex. And it wasn't until sort of week 3 or 4 that people were really starting to enjoy all the different outcomes that the game could. We had big wins, we had big losses, the signing the contract, all of those different things that I think people started to think, there's something in it. But also they wanted to see Danny and with whoever contestants were on that night and whatever they were going to do together.
It's a show as well. It landed in the format, in the schedule, with enormous confidence because, it takes skill to make a show like that, but it was a format that had lived elsewhere. So you've kind of ironed out all of those. You just know how that show works, and it's coming off the back of a big family show, to then have Danny Dyer at the heart of another big family show that everybody can watch. It's kind of, it's that perfect storm of
Have you worked on shows that are slow burns, though, that start out maybe as not being instant hits, and then but slowly over time, through word of mouth and slowly gathering media attention, become much bigger than they were?
Yeah, not as many as I'd have liked, actually. But, you know, we usually say it takes about 3 series for a daytime quiz to land. And I think, sometimes I think channels are just a bit too quick to kill ideas because people need a habit. I think we sometimes get it wrong. We go a bit overcomplicated. But it usually takes, you know, how many series was Pointless?
I mean, Pointless, I think, almost didn't come back. It
Really?
did 30 episodes.
Wow.
It was on BBC Two. You know, in the middle of the summer. You know, it was sort of gently eased out there. And I'm not sure anyone was that certain about it, but it showed enough growth in its last week or so of transmission that I think, in that word of mouth way, people go, actually, watch this show. It's really funny. The game's clever, and you've got Xander and Richard, and they've got a thing going on because that was developing over that time as well. And so it came back and did a second series, third series, and then suddenly it just went from a nice show that people talked about a bit to a really big show, and then we did the celebrity shows on Saturday night, which I think is probably another thing that started happening, is those celebrity shows on Saturday night, allowing people to then find it during the week.
Because those are huge, aren't they? Those celebrity, that's become a massive, like bigger than X Factor, for example, aren't they now?
Yeah.
You never expected that would become such a key part of BBC One Saturday night, week in, week out.
No, not at all. I mean, I think we've had something like 800 or 900 celebrities on the show now. We've made an awful lot of them. Some of them come back and keep going and keep trying. But I think no one ever saw that. But I think it's got that sort of sweet spot again of Alexander and Richard being the sort of perfect sort of host for a Saturday night tea time. Got a game that everyone can play because you can give a really obvious answer or a really obscure answer. So particularly if you're watching as a family, you can still feel clever enough because you've given an answer. And it's funny. Yeah, I think that's the other bit, whether it's Weakest Link or Pointless or even Millionaire in places.
It had BBC Two to grow in as well, same as Weakest Link. You know, that was a brilliant place to just try different stuff and allow shows to get confident with what they were and what they wanted to do and let the audience become familiar.
Does it feel to you they're bigger than ever, quiz shows? It strikes me with things like Pointless, Saturday Night, The Wall, The Chase on ITV. I've seen the Christmas TV schedules. ITV is basically showing The Chase all over Christmas. I mean, that's it. Millionaire's back, primetime, ITV. It feels like more and more, even more so, the schedulers and the channels are relying on them.
Well, audiences love them, but also in terms of filling a schedule, they're pretty cost effective because you can do 4 a day. You know, they make financial sense and you get, you know, massive production value, big entertainment, big noise, you know.
I think a bit of that is driven by, in America as well, there's a bit of a resurgence on prime time because they're relatively cost effective, even at American levels, and that's fed the market more globally.
Judith, as I say, Millionaire's back. It went off air for quite a long time. Chris Tarrant, you know, stopped doing it. Now it's back with Jeremy Clarkson. How do you feel this new version compares to the old version? What do you feel about the changes, the slight format tweaks, and Jeremy in charge?
Yes, I don't like the Ask the Host one. I don't see the point of that, really. I don't know. It's such a personal opinion, but I just thought that Chris Tarrant was so good at it, and it was so much his show. And somehow, being on with Chris Tarrant, he felt as if he wanted you to win in a funny way. You know, he was very sort of encouraging about it. I think Jeremy Clarkson is not, really. I don't think he's as good as Chris. But I'm biased. I mean, you know, I haven't got an unbiased opinion about it. But I just thought Chris was so good at it. And he had all those sort of little catchphrases and things. You know? Yes.
And what do you think about reviving them in general? I mean, The Weakest Link, surely it's only a matter of time before it comes back,
isn't it? Yeah, but I'm 75, you know. also, there is, even with The Crown, it takes time to accept Olivia Colman after Claire. You know, and I suppose it depends whether the host is very different. And can I say that one of the most important things is casting? I mean, behind the scenes casting. But I remember Lynn having so much energy and persuasiveness about me doing it at the beginning when I didn't understand it. And the change of main producer, Jo, was also fantastic energy, and she never stopped laughing at my jokes before we went on. So, if you've got that kind of camaraderie behind the scenes in what we call the village, I mean, it's absolutely vital. I mean, the producer's got to have as much energy as you have to do it.
Jo, what was it like working with Anne at peak Weakest Link period?
Yeah, character building, I think, is the euphemism. It was amazing. It was probably still my best ever job. I got instructed on how to dress quite early on because I was told I dress like a contestant with contestant shoes.
Good heavens, Jo, I said, you're wearing contestant shoes. Not now.
Maison Margiela now, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. And now, talking of now, what are you looking for? It's that age-old question. It's that age-old question. I'm just asking you now because we're going to throw it open to the audience anyway soon. Might as well get it out of the way now. What are commissioners and channels looking for when it comes to quiz shows?
It sounds churlish to say. I mean, something that stands out. Ultimately, you just want people to notice a new quiz. As I said before, it's really hard to launch a new quiz, especially daytime ones. There's a lot of them, and the ones that we've got at the moment are really potent still. So something that stands out, something that's got a format that at least tries to do something different that you haven't seen before, or even worse, isn't on telly now, and you go, you've just called it something different, but it's the same thing. And that's hard because we all know if we work in the business that everything's just little incremental turns of a dial, but watch a lot of telly and then know what's on already.
James, do you get a constant stream of people with their pieces of paper with their quiz show formats thrust at you? Or do you encourage that? And do you need, because your company effectively, they make a lot of very great quiz shows, don't they? You're specialists in this world.
Yeah,
what
there's
are you
a lot of we get a lot of emails. Yeah, I've got the big new thing, and Weakest Link came from an email from a letter probably originally. I think for us at Remarkable and within the bigger Endemol Shine group, it's all about trying to create our own new formats and sell them around the world. That's sort of what we try and do. So what we're trying to do every day is, as Jo says, how's it different? How's it new? Is there a killer top line that you just go, oh, okay, so I understand that's the quiz where I'm trying to give an answer that no one else can think of. In the case of Pointless, or 15 questions to £1 million. That was Millionaire had that such a strong top line, and then actually everything that follows after it starts to fit into place. So you're trying to do lots of things. A simple sell, a great mechanic at the heart of it. Who could the host be, and why does it feel different? I think probably the main check boxes.
And do you think the quiz shows are going to change much? Obviously TV's changing a lot. The streaming services, your Netflixes, your Amazon Primes. I mean, it feels like they're tentatively stepping into this space a little bit.
Yeah,
and how is that going to affect, do you think, the big mainstream channels and their shows?
I think those guys will go there, and they'll either do it in the biggest, most spectacular way ever, so it's the biggest quiz you've ever seen, or it also feels like for more of them that are starting to have a global rollout, that actually they're recognising the value of a good quiz in that it's instantly recognisable. It's recognisable in all the biggest shows. Have a universality to them that you can watch in any country, and you can still watch Deal or No Deal and get what's going on. So it seems like those guys in the end will think, oh yeah, we'd like some of that, because if Netflix could have their own quiz or game that they then roll out to all their different markets, that feels like that could be that could be a game changer for them.
Joe, what do you think about reviving old formats, old quiz show formats? Is that something you feel there's, I mean, you know, apart from Millionaire coming back fairly soon after it then went away, but they're bringing back really old ones. Sometimes, like they're talking, bringing back Bullseye and all of the, you know,
I'm
those.
delighted to see
Oh yeah.
Bullseye back. I mean, I used to love Bullseye, and so, you know, I think fine, and I'll watch them like everybody else will. But I think there's something amazing about seeing, you know, a room full of producers and development researchers who've come up with an idea and they put a run through on, and it's a new thing, and so, you know, it's checks and balances, isn't it? Because I'm more keen to see the next big thing than that thing.
I think they ought to bring back Top of the Form.
Oh yeah.
I was looking through a list of old quizzes, and it was very good in its day. And there isn't a quiz program for very young people.
Right.
I mean, there's that one Genius, which is worries me a bit. But Top of the Form would be a team of young ones.
Yeah.
I think it would be a very good idea. That.
Yeah, Top of the Form was brilliant. What would you like to see anything come back?
The book quiz, because it might be one I slightly know the answers to. I'd quite like Blankety Blank to come back.
Oh, yes.
Because
But you've got
I've
to have
been on
those
it
doors.
twice and I haven't the foggiest idea how it works.
I think there was an episode, wasn't there, last year or the year before Christmas, I think, hosted by David Williams, I think, on ITV, Blankety Blank. Yeah. And would you think of bringing anything back that went away?
I think of the shows we've made as probably Deal or No Deal will be the one.
Yes.
That was the biggest show that we made for a long time.
Yeah.
And what happens next to that?
Which was, of course, a game show, a quiz show, game show without any questions.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Which, and you know, we made, well, Richard over there made, 3,000 episodes of that. So they can run and run and run those shows.
If that was coming back, if Noel wasn't available, what kind of host would you go for?
Well, I think what Noel was brilliant at was creating the world around it. And that whole studio, whether it was the main player in the game or the 22 people waiting to play the game, the studio audience, the crew, everything, he created what he called the Dream Factory. And there was something special about that. And actually, when you look back at clips now, everyone is in that world, everyone is enjoying it. So I think all of our shows, actually, and all of the most successful shows, have their own worlds that they build, whether it's stepping into Anne's world on The Weakest Link or The Chasers or The Eggheads. It's about creating those worlds that you step into for the show.
Absolutely. Right, I think we've got time now for some questions from the audience. There's a gentleman there, yes. Oh, have we got a mic? Oh, don't worry, just shout it out. Oh, there's a mic on the way. There we go.
Joe, when you were at the BBC, I made a few series for you, factual series, and you were very on it when it came to the casting of contributors. So far, you haven't spoken too much about the importance of casting contributors on quiz shows. For example, Bullseye contributors are very different to Blockbusters, very different to The Weakest Link or other programmes. Can you talk a bit about that?
I mean, I think quizzes live or die by the people who want to go on them. And for a show like Weakest Link, you need all kinds of everything. And I won't speak for James, but on a show like The Wall, when you're casting one couple who have to carry a show, it's a very different pressure on those people. I think it's hard because quizzes tend to skew towards, you said you think 50 is sort of the optimum age, and I think 50-year-old white guys are the kind of stock in trade for people who want to proactively go on quizzes. It's always really hard to encourage everybody to apply. But I love the democratic nature of a quiz show, actually, that anyone can rock up. And it's that magic of Millionaire that it could have been you if you did, so.
Thank you.
One sort of thought on that for perhaps from some of the guys, and that is that my son loves quizzes. He's got special needs and he watches Challenger TV all the time. But looking back at Family Fortunes, for example, or looking back at Supermarket Sweep, they seem very ahead of the curve in terms of showing people from BAME backgrounds and ethnic minorities. And I thought that was really interesting to look at those shows and that's quite counterintuitive.
Interesting.
I think that's right. I think I look at a show. Lynn's getting a lot of love tonight, but Impossible. When we commissioned that show, because you had a cast of returning quizzers for money reasons on the budget to make that show cost effective and look like it had scale, but we had a real opportunity to cast a more diverse range, and I feel really proud of that commission. I think it's continued in that vein. I think you're right to identify. I don't think we're as good as we can be. We need to be better. Production teams need to be more diverse, because then casting teams are more diverse, and people coming up to you in the street look like you, and you're more inclined to audition to be on a show.
Thank you. Can you pass that just to the gentleman behind you there in glasses?
Thank you. I was wondering, with the obviously quizzes are very big, very good on live TV and terrestrial and so on. But I'm wondering, a lot of people are saying the future of television is streaming, or for a lot of genre. And I'm wondering if you feel quizzes will work when people are time shifting and using streaming more. Will they work just as well, do you feel?
I think it's a really good question. That will you watch? Would you binge Pointless? Don't know. Probably might do. Some of us do for a living. I think it's then thinking about how do you change the format so it recognises that actually having the freedom where a show doesn't have to be fitting into a 45-minute time slot or an hour or whatever it might be, actually gives you more freedom potentially within a game to think about, well, it could be all kinds of different lengths. I think it's probably also about thinking, how do you get people from one episode to the next? Is there a bigger story going on across the series rather than the more sort of self-contained daily winners that we might have on some of our shows? Or I think you look at something like House of Games. For us, because it's a compendium show with all sorts of different bits in it, that actually we're seeing lots of people watch that on iPlayer, because it's just a really nice, fun half-hour watch to catch up on.
Thank
yes,
you.
It's very much an appointment to watch show for live TV. I just wonder how folk feel it could translate.
And do you watch quiz shows now? When you're not watching Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever?
I quite like Millionaire, actually, because, as I say, the questions become more difficult. Don't think I watch any. Oh, I watch Eggheads. But it might be to do with the time they're on rather than me not liking them.
Sure. Right at the back there, yes.
Thank you all for your time. I trotted in a bit late, so I apologise if this is reinventing the wheel a bit. I was wondering if any of you could say anything about the role of the questions producer. I've heard that such people exist, and it sounds a bit like chocolate tasting. But I was wondering if you could shine light as to, is there such a thing as a hot shot or a star questions producer? I kind of have a sense it's maybe a bit like being an academic, in the sense that you can be very brainy, but you may not be able to teach very well. I mean, does being questions producer entail, being a Trivial Pursuit buff? And if not, then, what sort of things do they have to be very vigilant of? Because I presume that they are quite a key component in the general production.
I think that's a really, really good question. They're probably not as revered as gods, but they should be. Certainly for those in the know, they absolutely make or break a quiz, because the tone of a question also defines what a show is. I used to love it in The Weakest Link. You could ask normal questions, but then hearing the real name of a rapper come out of Annie's mouth was quite funny, or a real supposedly brain box being wrong-footed by which Kardashian. Those kind of gear changes that you can conduct by writing good questions. It's a really hard job, because they need to have such good attention to detail and triple verify and how do you word, it's, you know, it's like one of those brilliant dark arts jobs, because, you know, writing it so it's going to be true forever, so that you don't have to have all information correct at time of recording, which, you know, I understand why that goes on the credits, but if questions are written correctly, you shouldn't have to have that disclaimer on your credit roller. So they're crucial. And if you want to be a question producer, go for it, because I think that's a brilliant.
James, do you have a whole army of questions?
Yeah, some of them are sitting in this room. The question producer are pointless. One of the question producers is in the room, and I mean, he's probably going to come in and ask for a massive rise in the morning after all of that.
Sorry.
But sort of quite right too, in a way, in that without those teams, and actually throughout the team, as a senior level who is coordinating it, making sure it's correct, that it's come back from verification, that it's all ready to go, that all of the notes that the host might need to follow up with follow-up information on Pointless, you know, Richard, the stack of papers that Richard has, there are thousands of facts there ready to go in every show, or being prepared every day, and it's a huge amount of information. So yeah, without them, we're stuffed.
It's also quite, you know, nowadays we never had multiple choice on Wikislink. Obviously, it was quick fire questions, and that's a skill in itself. How do you write the perfect quick fire question if your quiz is on the buzzer, as opposed to how do you make an interesting multiple choice question that does what you need it to do on something like Millionaire, where you think you know it, and then the next option comes up and you go, oh shit, it might be that. All of that kind of fabulous geekiness is just, that's the juice of the quiz, I think.
Thank you. Yes, the lady just here.
Thank you very much. I just wondered about format incubators. Do we have any in the UK? Because we seem to come across these. I'm company owner, and I come across the American format incubators that incubate concepts for new producers into the American market, onto the Canadian market. Do we have anything like this in the UK that we could access potentially?
I think there's a few of them around. You probably have more pictures from that lot than I would do. I mean, you know, everyone's trying to think of the next big quiz. So, yes, they exist. There's, you know, distribution companies who are out there looking to invest. Some of the bigger groups. So yeah, they're around.
You mean like format generators who just are churning out formats? Yeah, I mean there are them. You know. It tends to not be a terribly collaborative process when that's the case. It's like, we've got this format, do you want it? There's no room for that kind of growth of something that, oh, actually, it's not a holiday, it's not reducing money, it's, you know, it's... So.
The weakest link was half a page from a doctor and a friend in Staffordshire, and it simply said a programme with links. And what was vital... It's Lynn and the development team who got it from that to what we put on air.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Lady there.
The man at the back has had his hand up forever.
Okay, well, we'll go to the lady in the middle there first, and then the man at the back. I promise you.
You mentioned Danny Dyer was a bit of a risk, maybe, as a presenter. Do you think that the audience has changed for quiz shows? Because obviously quizzes, testing of intelligence is quite a... not something that people enjoyed at school, maybe, but then they come and watch it later on. Do you think that the audience has changed, and do you think quiz shows are changing because of that? So, like, Pointless is, I would say, something more enjoyable for myself than Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And I'm just wondering where's the next place it's going to go, because The Wall is quite... I'd say more inclusive than others, and so do you think the audience has changed from when they first came to air?
I think it's probably about what time of day the show's on, and that you're picking up very different audiences. Sometimes it's the same audience, but often it's different audiences. As I said earlier with The Wall, what we found when you get all the ratings data back is that families and kids particularly loved it because it's big and it's bright and there's balls bouncing everywhere, and Danny doing his thing that they may well know from EastEnders. So it felt like a a sort of totally different thing. There's something like Pointless, which is a little bit more cerebral. So, certainly the daytime shows, and it's a bit more of a test of your knowledge. So I think it's not necessarily the audience changing. I think it's the audience will respond if they find something or someone that they like. And I think probably something that surprises them as well. I think part of the reason why The Wall grew across the few weeks that it did was that it felt like you turn on never quite knowing what was going to happen at the end of the show.
Thank you. And the gentleman at the back.
Thank you. I was going to say, I've only had one drink, so when Anne said she was in her 70s, I thought she was 50. I'm really surprised.
He thought you were 50.
What argument are you giving?
The gentleman thought you were 50. He was shocked and stunned when you said that.
So
I've had a facelift, so 50 years ago.
I'll try and combine these questions together. First of all, you said that you have been on Blankety Blank twice, and I was going to ask what you've done with the Blankety Blank checkbook and pen. And next time you're at an RTS event, can you bring them with you so I can see what they look like?
What did you do with your Blankety Blank checkbook and pen, he asked?
What did I what?
What did you do with your Blankety Blank checkbook and pen? Do you remember?
Was there one on there?
Yeah, I think so. You didn't get one, though?
I think I was overwhelmed by the Cranky Brothers, that they call them.
The Crankies. Yes, and your next one.
Sorry, I was just going to expand on... So you talked about Pointless earlier, and what I liked about the Pointless presenters was that one of them is a Fulham fan. How can I not like them? And secondly, one of them seemed to do a lot of work with charity, so I noticed that he did something to help people that died of male suicide. So you also see them as a human side. Where I'm concerned is when you look at Jeremy Clarkson and you read about what Jeremy Clarkson has said or done to offend people from ethnic minorities. He was reprimanded. Well, I mean, it's all out there, what he's done and what he said. I just question whether it's a bit like, I like pizza, but I hate Brussels sprouts. If you gave me a pizza with Brussels sprouts on it, I wouldn't eat it, even though I like pizza. So if I like a quiz show and they've got a presenter that I don't like, I can't watch it. You talked about the role of the people, the producers of the quiz, the people that put the questions together, but I was just wondering how important the presenter is. You did touch on it earlier, but I was looking at it more from an ethical standpoint.
Gosh, it's a good job you're not writing questions.
Do you ever think of ethics when you're casting? I mean, we should say there's no one from ITV to defend the Millionaire.
I mean, I'd say that's a question for ITV, wouldn't you say, Joe?
I think so.
In the end, it's trying to find out who's the best fit for the show.
I mean, Danny Dyer is a controversial host on a BBC One Saturday night quiz. He is not what you would expect from BBC One, is he? And I think that's what makes him good. He's a risk, but it's a risk that's paid off. And I think, we do have to make hard decisions, and you don't know if you're going to get it right. You can just do best endeavours.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question, I think. Oh, let me go to the gentleman there. Sorry. Maybe we'll have one more after.
Hey, say, for example, you've got like a new quiz show format. How do you work out what time you're going to slot it in? Is it a case of convenience or is it strategy? Has there ever been a time where you put a quiz show on at a particular time and it didn't pan out?
So, when people are pitching me a quiz, the first thing I have to decide is, could it work every day? So daytime quizzes are stripped, Monday to Friday, and there are some shows that just work in peak once a week. It's a big affair, so like The Wall. So that's the first thing you look at is, would it work as a strip in a daytime schedule? And invariably, you sort of know where your quiz slots are. At the BBC, you would play a quiz at 2:15 or 5:15 because after the news, after doctors, you kind of know there's an audience there waiting. The audience is younger the later you go in the day, so you've got broader appeal. So you need to have quizzes that will work for a broader audience. So, but when you pitch a quiz, you should have an idea of where you think it would play.
Thank you. Maybe one more, yeah. Just
yes.
Gentleman here. Go there. Yeah, you've had your hand up for a while. Then we'll do two more. Gentleman in front. I've never had so many questions in a.
So in the years since The Weakest Link went off air, we've seen the rise of some quite mean-spirited shows come to light. Golden Balls, for one, a good example. Do you think there are ever any shows that go too far or go too mean-spirited, or is there something in place to protect the psyche of those taking part? Just your thoughts on that.
Too mean? Shows could be too mean? I'm thinking not as far as you're concerned.
No.
No.
No. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? I mean, we did very well with me getting increasingly horrible. And funny. I think you've got to be a bit funny. I think if sometimes we'd do The Weakest Link and I would have a go at, say, a student or a young girl, and I would come off and say, don't use that, that was killing kittens. And then you can get away with a great deal more if somebody, what you need is somebody to play with, actually. You need someone who's a bit cocky, who think they're going to get the better of you, and then you can be seriously rude.
Absolutely. Do you have a view on meanness in shows?
Well, I think it's important. Contributor care is really a key issue in our industry at the moment. On Weakest Link, everybody knew what they were getting into. You know, that audition process was rigorous. On the day, you know, contestant teams were amazing. People wanted it. That's what people came on the show for. And I think, you know, tonally, you look at the moment on the wall, you look at those kind of Cheryl Shaft formats, there's a warmth and a heart. Danny wants them to win, you know, if they've screwed the contract up, he's on their side. And again, you know, those contestants will be briefed and will be looked after. Ultimately, they're going on a show and they could win a lot of life-changing money. So, you know, it's for them to decide if the risk outweighs that moment on the telly.
Thank you.
I think they could easily get a divorce too at the end of one. I mean, there was the one with the husband who was put in what's he called?
Jeff.
Yes,
Jeff was in the...
He was the one answering questions. He didn't get one single one right. And they built up quite a good... What's the first bit they built up?
They built up quite a good pot of money.
Pot of money, exactly. And then he tore up the contract. So they ended up with nothing. And I thought, how on earth are they going to survive that? This idiot.
I think to Joe's point, that particularly, you know, a show like The Wall that had been on in America before, so people could have a look at it, they knew what you're getting into. And there's big money on the wall, but equally it's then about looking after them when it doesn't go well, just as it is about when they do go well, when it does go well.
We once had, because you can't let someone walk out. And we once had someone who was in security, sort of with the royals, and I knew that he carried arms, and I kept calling him Bang Bang Dave. And he did nearly walk out.
Oh, really? Why did he nearly walk out? What was the...
Well, he felt that was going too far.
Ah,
yeah.
Fantastic. As a gentleman there, yes, and then I'll come to you.
There are so many questions I want to ask. I mean, I really want to know how much Judith paid her phone a friend, but my question's for Joe, and it's just a light-hearted one.
Oh dear.
As you move to Channel 4, where the biggest show is the Great British Bake Off, if you were given the chance to take any quiz show from any other channel, which quiz show would you take?
Good question.
God. I'd take the chase.
Thank you. Gentleman here who's been waiting a long time in the second row.
Hi, thank you. Andrew Eborn. I have a company with the founders of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, David Briggs and Coleman Hutchinson and Mike Whitehill, and also they combine forces with people who created The Weakest Link, so Fintan Coyle. Going back to what Anne said beforehand about how we used to pitch, it was a paper format, and it used to be a couple of paragraphs you did that. It's very interesting to hear how that whole process has changed now, because I think you want sizzle reels, you want various things which are tested in various places. If you could maybe expand a bit more about the commissioning process and how that's changed over the last, probably a couple of decades.
Well, I can speak to my process, because I think, sizzles are all well and good. If it's a sizzle of a format that doesn't exist elsewhere, it's probably just a good sizzle with all the good bits pulled out, but what does it feel like as a 45-minute show? I like sitting in a room with people who understand the ins and outs of their format and totally believe it and can tell me what it is in less than 5 minutes. I like the creative process. I commissioned a thing called Armchair Detectives, which is one of my, I'm sad about that show because I loved it, and it was sort of a quiz show, but it was also sort of a drama, and it didn't work, and it was too expensive to bring it back, but pretty much they came in the room and they went, how you watch Midsummer Murders? We're going to do that, and we're going to quiz up the I think it was you. I got it immediately, and it was their passion. They knew what that show was, and for me, that's the best way. It's best to ask James. He's very successful at getting quizzes away.
I think it's the run-through. At the end of the day, if we can't come in and demonstrate the game with a PowerPoint, a few bits of cards, people playing in the office, not necessarily the host of the show attached, I think if it stands up on that level, then there's probably something to it. So it's about getting that run-through right. And you kind of know quite quickly. I mean, you certainly know as a commissioner of like, oh God, this is going to be long, or there's something here. And we've had experiences at very much both ends of that spectrum. Sometimes we're like, oh, I think we've cracked it, and other times where you think we definitely haven't.
David Young, who some people will know, he's brilliant because if he's got a device or something, he'll come and make you play it. He'll have some bits of paper in his bag, and he'll go, right, just sit there and do this. Now, people who know me know I will love a run-through all day long, but instantly you're in, kind of putting the cards on the table is great. And it's a myth that run-throughs need to be super glossy and in somewhere swanky, because they're invariably in dusty basements somewhere. So.
Thank you. I think we have run out of time, so I'd just like to thank you for absolutely brilliant questions, and thank the fantastic panel, Judith, Joe, James and Anne, for their incredible insights. And I hope you've learned a few things, and maybe good luck with your formats, and maybe we'll all become millionaires with our quiz show formats one day. Thank you so much.
Thank you for Boyd.